have to read it. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. May I have your attention, please? Before we begin this meeting, we ask that everyone silence your cell phones. The FBISD Board of Trustee meeting is an open meeting for the public to observe the board conducting district business. Therefore, the audience members may address the board during the designated audience items section on the agenda. If you have any printed materials you want to give to the board members, you must provide them to the board secretary, Jane Kaiser, or to me, and we will provide them to the board. We also ask that the members of the audience be respectful of others, remain quiet during the meeting so that everyone is able to hear the proceedings. For your convenience, microphones have been placed on both sides of the boardroom. Please speak directly into the microphone if you're asked to answer a question or addressing the board during the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Officer Ontiveros. The time is 6:01 and we have the presence of a quorum, and this meeting has been duly called and notice of the meeting has been given in the time and manner required by law. We're glad that you're all here tonight, and we're going to begin with the pledges of allegiance led by some students. So I'd ask everyone to stand, and the students will lead us in the pledges.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag.
I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible.
If you'll please remain standing for a silent invocation. Thank you. You may be seated. Our next item of business are our recognitions. Dr. Dupree.
Thank you, Madam President. We're always delighted to recognize our outstanding students and staff. If the board would join me in front of the dais, we'll do that right now.
Thank you, Dr. Dupree. We are proud to recognize several students and staff members tonight. First, we have our two Garcia Middle School 8th grade students who were chosen to lead the Pledges of Allegiance. Nick Kaysen is a peer assistance and leadership PAL student and is a strong leader. He also participates in extracurricular activities in school, which includes basketball and track. Outside of school, Nick excels in baseball. He also enjoys volunteering at church and at nursing homes. Nick is usually the first to volunteer to help, and he always has a positive attitude. Noor Batlu is also a pal who is always willing to help when needed. You will always see a smile on her face. Noor works tirelessly to maintain her grades and is a member of the Garcia Middle School Orchestra. She loves to work in her community and is a perfect example of what a pal should be. Congratulations to both of these students in their leadership and service. And if you're here to support these students, would you stand so we may recognize you? Next, Hodges Bend Middle School Student Council sponsor, Mr. Clarence Ford, was recognized last November as a recipient of the 2015 Texas Association of Student Councils, TASC, Eddie G. Bull Advisor of the Year Award. The TASC Middle Level District has 80 members from Galveston to Cleveland, and Mr. Ford was also selected as the 2014 District Advisor of the Year in September 2014. Mr. Ford's dedication, tenacity, and passion for helping to guide our youth makes him a great asset to Fort Bend ISD. We want to congratulate Mr. Ford on receiving one of the highest honors TASC can bestow on a student council sponsor. Would you come forward, please? Just start. Oh, I'm sorry. You know what? I'm glad you got 2 applauses. I was concentrating. And now I turn the program over to Michael Madden.
Madam President, board members, Dr. Dupree, tonight we are proud to recognize the students who form the junior level service cohort of the Student Leadership 101 program. The purpose of the Student Leadership program is to support the Board of Trustees' community engagement agenda by providing district junior and senior level high school students with opportunities to demonstrate leadership and become involved in volunteer service. As such, the board has helped these students become partners for positive change in Fort Bend County. This year, these talented and committed students have traveled throughout Fort Bend County, meeting the people who lead and shape the future of our community. The students have had the opportunity to explore and learn about themselves as leaders, and some have even taken the first steps to begin their journey as leaders. Please help us recognize and congratulate the Student Leadership 101 cohort. From Austin High School, Queen Aya Hellam. Austin High School, Ashlyn Sheffield. Austin High School, Julia Shepstone. Bush High School, unable to attend, Camila Barrientos. Bush High School, Philip Lee. Bush High School, Jennifer Ogu. From Clements High School, Mani Mutsira, Charlene Mani Mutsira. Clements High School, Xander Tejo. Clements High School, Sarah Venkataraman. From Dulles High School, Jane Cloninger. Dulles High School, Luke Metzer, who's unable to attend. And Sonika Fanse, Dulles High School. From Hightower High School, Jonathan Carey. Angeli James. And Alina Maji. From Kempner High School, Anthony Amy. Bianca Jimenez. And Kennedy Vergi. From Marshall High School, Veronica Lopez. Chukwadalu Onanenye. From Rich Point High School, Lillian Bajor. Jacob Stanley. And Heather Wickstrand. From Travis High School, unable to attend, Zariah McInnes. Victoria Pride. Cameron West. Just had to have that spotlight. Okay. From Willowridge High School, Jaquel Jackson, unable to attend. Victoria Prada. And Marilyn Santana. Any administrators that are here to support these wonderful cohort members, if you could please stand, and any wonderful parents that are here, you are the reason that they are starting this incredible journey toward their leadership. We thank you so much. Dr. Dupree, I turn the meeting back over to you.
All right, our next item of business will be our audience items. We have 4 speakers tonight, and you'll have 3 minutes, as Officer Ontiveros mentioned. Mrs. Tossan will be timing you and let you know when you have 30 seconds left on your 3 minutes. So our first speaker tonight is Landon Ritchie, maybe, or it's hard for me to read the facts. Landon? Can you make sure the microphone is on? Perfect, thank you.
Good evening, Dr. Dupree, Madam President James, and trustees of the school board. Thank you for allowing me to speak at this FBISD board meeting. My name is Landon Ritchie, and I'm an 8th grade transgender student at Dulles Middle School. As my mom mentioned, which she will mention in a few moments, I socially transitioned this school year, and I really appreciate the support my teachers, counselor, principal, and nurses have provided. With their support and support from friends and family, I am able to be myself at school, which makes me feel more comfortable and less stressed, allowing me to focus more on my academics. In the few cases that I have experienced and reported bullying, the school did an amazing job dealing with the situation. I am really glad that FBISD and Dulles is committed to creating an anti-bullying environment. Some of my friends and I have benefited from this. Although I have not experienced any discrimination, I am here today for those who face discrimination on a daily basis and for those who will come after me. School shouldn't be a place where kids feel vulnerable and unprotected, but a place where they feel free to learn new things, make new friends, and discover more about who they are and where they fit in their community. With the reassurance and inclusive non-discrimination policy brings, students can get more out of the school experience. Thank you for working to create a learning environment that allows me to thrive, and thank you for considering adding a non-discrimination policy review to the next month's agenda.
Thank you, Landon. Yeah, our next speaker is Erica Ritchie.
Good evening, Dr. Dupree, Madam President James, and trustees, board members. My name is Erica Ritchie, and I'm the proud mother of a transgender middle school student who you already met. My son told me he is transgender August of 2014. He transitioned at school this year, and his new name and correct gender is on the school file. The staff at Dulles Middle School have been very supportive during this time. Bullying is an issue in every school in the nation, as I'm sure you are aware. I commend the school district for participating in the Anti-Defamation League's No Place for Hate anti-bullying program. However, this does not protect students from discrimination. Bullying is unwanted aggressive behavior among school children that involves a real or perceived power imbalance. The behavior is repeated or has the potential to be repeated. Discrimination is the unjust or prejudicial treatment of different categories of people, things, including gender identity, gender expression, and sexual orientation. Page 1 of the Fort Bend ISD Welfare Freedom from Discrimination, Harassment, and Retaliation states, discrimination against a student is defined as conduct directed at a student on the basis of race, color, religion, gender, national origin, disability, or any other basis prohibited by law that adversely affects the student. Under Texas state law, transgender and gay individuals are not protected. Even if the phrase, or by any other basis prohibited by law, is referring to federal law, it is not clear and leaves students unprotected. Page 3 of the Student Code of Conduct states, district does not discriminate against students on the basis of race, sex, national origin, disability, religion, color, or ethnicity when enforcing the provisions of the SEC, again, leaving LGBT students unprotected. You have likely read the 2013 National Climate Survey conducted by Gleason, in which it concludes a hostile school environment, school climate affects a student's academic success and mental health. Adding the words sexual orientation, gender identity, gender expression to the non-discrimination statements and policies will only strengthen them. HISD made those inclusions in their non-discrimination policy in 2012 and have experienced no ill effects. The trustees unanimously passed the policy change and can testify that this updated policy has only benefited their school district. All students in FBISD deserve to be protected from discrimination while at school,
30 seconds.
including mine. As a parent of a transgender student, and someone who is involved in the larger transgender community, I've seen firsthand what discrimination can do to the LGBT youth. Transgender students thrive in a school setting where they are allowed to live as their true selves. Students who are not transgender learn how to accept and exist with others, taking those skills beyond the schoolyard. It's my hope that the members of the board will add a non-discrimination policy review to next month's agenda. Thank you for your service. Have a good evening.
Thank you, Ms. Ritchie. Our next speaker tonight is Alonzo Garcia.
Hello, thank you for hearing me. Although I don't have a perfectly prepared speech like my family, I do want to say that I am the Dulles Middle School one of the Dulles Schools Middle School art teacher. My name is Alonzo Garcia. I think when I first met Landon, I wasn't sure if he was a male or female, and then soon immediately realized that it doesn't matter. I did realize that knowing that how I was bullied as a child in middle school, I wasn't always 6'1", nor 200 pounds. So I do know the pressure and pain that can happen in everyday school. And even as a teacher, I can still see it. Even if Landon doesn't see it or feel it, I still see it. And I definitely not only protect Landon, but anyone else that I think needs protection. Again, I have seen bullying happen to Landon and have done everything in my power to stop it, as well as administrators in my school. I think having a GSA, Gay Straight Alliance Club, is absolutely essential. We initially would meet once a month, and then I suggest we meet every Friday, and they absolutely loved it. I think it's a fantastic place to express themselves, to talk about their problems, to voice their opinions about things that happen in school, whether it's serious or silly. It's a really fantastic way to unwind and really know that they're being heard and taken care of. And I just want to say thank you for hearing out my family.
Thank you, Mr. Garcia. Our next speaker is Marissa Morgan.
Good evening. I was so excited about those young students' achievement, I forgot what I was going to say. I'm glad I wrote it down. My name is Marissa Morgan. Thank you so much for giving me this platform to speak. I am a resident of Fort Bend County. I am an employee with the city of Sugar Land, but more importantly, I am a grandmother with a grandson on the autism spectrum, and that's what I'd like to speak about tonight. Autism is rapidly growing in our homes, communities, and schools. A child is diagnosed every 11 minutes with autism spectrum disorder. As families and communities learn more about the autism spectrum, how about our school system? Did you know that Fort Bend County school system serves nearly 3,000 students diagnosed with autism or related disorders? All special needs students should not be categorized in the same manner. The focus should be on academics and not behavior. Palmer Elementary School has the highest number of students on the autism spectrum. Trust me, I do my homework. Are those teachers prepared and knowledgeable on how to educate these students? There is funding at the state level available to our school system with getting training and education for our teachers. Quote, "It's not what I can't do, it's what I can do that will make a difference," end quote. Grant Manier, a young, talented, award-winning echo artist living with autism. Autism speaks. It's time to listen. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Morgan. That concludes our audience items for tonight. Our next item is information. Dr. Dupree.
Yes, ma'am. We have one item this evening. We have a budget development update. Due to the change in meeting schedule, our CFO, Stephen Bassett, was unable to be here this evening, so our Executive Director of Finance, Dina Edgar, is going to make that presentation.
Might have a microphone.
Oh, okay. As mentioned, tonight I'll be providing an update of the 16-17 budget development update. So in review of the agenda, we'll first take a look at revenues at the state level. Then we'll look at projected district revenues and property values. We'll talk a little bit about what's changed since last we presented in March. And then we'll view numbers in aggregate given different property value scenarios. Then we'll take a look at our debt service and our child nutrition funding. Okay, so moving to the state level, this chart represents sales tax growth since January 2015. You can see a huge decline beginning in March, right here. And then 7 of the most recent 10 months, beginning in June, 7 of those months are in the red. Okay, so this is a sales tax collection chart presented by calendar year for the last 4 years in 1-year moving average increments. So you can see that sales tax pretty much flatlined the 5th month of 2015, and that's looking at the screen line here, and then continued to decline from about October forward right into 2016, and that's right into the red line there. Again, this is relevant to determining capacity at the state level to fund outcomes coming out of litigation given a favorable ruling. This next table identifies performance by revenue type since the beginning of the state's fiscal year on September 1st. As expected, the huge declines can be seen in natural gas and oil production tax. But moreover, we're really seeing nearly across the board declines in projections with the exception of cigarettes and tobacco and fuels, motor fuels. Again, this is relevant to litigation outcomes and the state's ability to allocate additional K-12 public education funding. Okay, so let's look at our current projected 16-17 revenues. This hasn't changed a whole lot since March, since last month. As a reminder, local revenues include tax collections and other local, like gate receipts, interest earnings, summer school, things like that. The local portion makes up about 62% of our overall revenue, with state aid accounting for 37%. The remaining 1% mainly consists of federal funding from the SHARS and MAC program, which is for our Medicaid-eligible students, and that's at about $7 million. So in May, we'll be bringing a chart showing the history of state aid to local efforts so you can see how that's changed over the course of time. We've been modeling tax year 16 at 9% property value growth, and that's based on early conversations with our chief appraiser. What this chart is showing is that if CAD values, that central appraisal district values, were growing at the same rate as the comptroller value, and that's nearly 15%, we would be getting approximately $18.8 million more in revenues. And that's based on how formulas work. So keeping in mind that the formulas are derived from prior year's comptroller property tax division, or CPTD, value over CAD, central appraisal district value. The good news is we've been recently heard that growth may come in a little bit more favorable. It's important to remember that each additional percentage point yields about $3.4 million. So we're going to take a look at the profound impact a percentage change can have on our numbers in a minute. This next chart is based on tax year 2015 CPTD, or comptroller value. And the takeaway is here that 80% of our district value comes from the residential sector, with only about 13% coming from commercial and the remaining 7% from industrial and utilities. So we're heavily residential. And this is a new chart that you haven't seen before, but we've had discussions about it. And it's looking at the year-over-year change in property value from tax year 14 to tax year 15. And we experienced, like I said, about a 15% increase. What this slide is showing is that about 25% of that value growth is coming from brand new property, and 75% is coming from existing value. Okay, so let's take a look at what's changed since last month's assumptions. The first thing is we got an updated formula template, and that was released with a correction to a formula flaw in the previous version, and that actually worked out in our favor. We haven't made any changes to values or enrollment projections since last time, but we will receive our preliminary official Central Appraisal District values next week. They're due by April 30th. We'll probably get them sometime next week, and we will see some change. We're anticipated to see some changes there. The other thing that we did modify was our state comp ed number, which relates to our free and reduced. As you know, we made a huge collection, our effort in capturing those free and reduced kiddos at the beginning of the year, and we see that reflected in our numbers now. So we ticked that number up a little bit, and that's favorable to our state aid. We did remove the duplication of line items for the IR campuses that were named EDGE campuses, and that was a reduction of about $370,000. We've included additional bus routes associated with the opening of Ann McCormick Sullivan Elementary, the consolidation of M.R. Wood to Ferndale Henry, and then the EDGE program. We've also built in some efficiencies associated with the restructure of the ESL program, which is English as a second language, and then the DAEP consolidation. And then we've also included some positions that will be moving forward for recommendation in May. The new positions, most of them are all formula generated and are according to staffing guidelines. There's one new EDGE position that will be moving forward for request. The new positions in aggregate currently total a net increase of $1.3 million. However, we're still refining additional requests and waiting to see what happens with the property values before we bring forward any more recommendations. Okay, so moving into our projected budget, we're still anticipating ending 15-16 very favorably, and that's largely due to increased revenues with tax collections. Again, property values and tax collections are working in our favor this year. We're estimating a comfortable surplus rolling into our fiscal year end, and you'll now see in 15-16 a line item for other sources and uses, and that's at $5.26 million. This funding is going to be used to replenish our major maintenance for the purchase of the Dulles electrical upgrade, and that's actually on consent this evening. It'll be used also for the replacement cycle for White Fleet, and then to replenish our technology fund. This leaves the remaining anticipated net surplus of approximately $7.7 million. So we're still going to need to use this surplus to ease us through the next couple of years where that formula turns around on us. So in 16-17, we're experiencing that exact opposite situation that we're actually enjoying this year. Right now, with our current estimates, we're looking at an overall loss in revenue to the tune of $10 million, but that's with the current model. Again, this is mainly due to the state aid formula and the ratio of prior year comptroller value to CAD. And I know I keep mentioning this several times, but it's important to emphasize it does have huge swings in the formulas and in the way things work out. So we're currently looking at a deficit of approximately $5.8 million. That's under current assumptions. However, I mentioned earlier that we're hearing property value hasn't slowed as much as the CAD may have originally anticipated, so I wanted to take a moment to show you what the numbers may look like at 10%. So what you're seeing here is revenues go up. Right here, your deficit's going down by about $3.4 million, and then that leaves a deficit of about $2.3 million. Actually, you don't have these slides, so this is just on the presentation. If we go up to 11% in property value growth, looking at the 16-17 column, we yield another $3.4 million, moving our bottom line into the black at a little over $1 million. So each percent can quickly change the outcome of the budget. And we're going to have these numbers next week. So we do anticipate coming in above 9%, but we didn't want to change the numbers until we had the actual preliminary value from the CAD, because we don't want to keep changing that number when we're so close to having the actual number. So depending on how that looks, we'll bring in our final fund balance strategy recommendations in May. So we're planning for the worst, but hoping for the best when it comes to property value outcome. Okay, so let's switch to take a look at projected debt service fund. Expenditures exceeded revenues in 15-16, and that's largely because we paid down some debt early. Moving into August, we're going to need to use our fund balance to pay off our August debt payment. Projecting into 16-17, we anticipate revenues to exceed expenditures by a small margin, and this is modeling the reduction of the 2 pennies in the interest and sinking tax rate. So we're moving from 30 cents to 28 cents. This also assumes that the Series 2006 expected savings from the refunding, the estimated debt service for the commercial paper growth program, and the remarketing of the 2015 variable rate bonds. So all of that's built into this projection. We've got a lot of upcoming activity in the debt service fund. We're requesting approval of the refunding this evening, and we have our financial advisor here, Mr. Villaseñor, and our bond counsel, Mr. Frels, and they're here tonight to assist in any additional questions you may have. In May, we'll bring approval of the remarketing of the Series 2015A variable rate debt. We'll also price the refund of the 2006 bonds, and then in June, we'll bring commercial paper items to the board. At the same time, we'll also conduct the remarketing of the 2015A variable rate debt. So a lot of activity going on in the next couple of months. We plan to hold the next Bond Oversight Committee meeting in mid to late summer. Around that same time, we'll be introducing our commercial paper program. And then rolling into spring and summer of 17, we'll issue bonds to pay off that commercial paper program. And then we'll reinitiate another commercial paper project up to $100 million. So that'll be a continuous cycle for us. Okay, moving to Child Nutrition Fund. So you may recall in fiscal year 15, we had a negative change to fund balance, and that included that $2.5 million carryover expense for that renovations. 15-16 is ending nearly balanced, and we're currently showing a balanced projections for 16-17. It's important to note that the Texas Department of Agricultural, TDA, specifies that the fund balance of a school nutrition program cannot exceed 3 months' expenditures. So we're currently a little over 2 months. So we're very compliant there. We're still continuing our collection efforts for delinquent accounts throughout April. We begin our alternate meal program for students with balances over $35, and that'll happen in May. Moving into June, we'll initiate new procedures for the free and reduced registration process. And what we're trying to do is capture those kids up front so that we don't experience the same thing that we did this current year with that 34%. But we're up a couple percentages now, and it's significant. So this will all positively impact our funding in 16-17, as will the reduction in the amount of negative balances that the general fund is currently picking up. Taking a look at the upcoming budget timeline, this month the board reviewed contract renewal recommendations for approval. Again, we'll receive CAD values for tax year 2016, hopefully mid next week, and then we'll have a really good idea of what we're looking at. In May, we'll review compensation and stipend adjustments, additional position requests, and we'll formally call the date of the budget hearing, and that's required by law. In June, we'll hold the hearing on the 6th, and then we present final budget amendment, and then finally adopt the budget at the last June meeting. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Edgar. Do we have some questions, Mr. Rice?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Ms. Edgar. I just wanted to review a couple of things with you to make sure I heard what you say and understand it correctly. I'm hearing you say that recent sales tax growth is down 7 out of the last 10 months. It's been off. And also the state revenue performance as of March of this year is not outperforming what the comptroller budgeted at the beginning of the biennium, correct?
That's correct.
And furthermore, I'm understanding that for 2016-17, the percentage of our operating funds for the local percentage will be 62%, compared with 37% for the state. And I believe when I got on this board, those percentages were closer to 52% local and 48% for the state.
That's correct.
And that has been increasing at a dramatic rate because of the way our school funding is currently set up. So as our property values rise and we receive the benefit of the increase in value from the Central Appraisal District, 12 months later, the state of Texas recognizes that delta and they decrease their funding to our school district by a corresponding amount. Am I understanding that correctly?
Sir.
And so as our property values continue to rise over time, if they do, the amount contributed by the state will go down, and more and more and more and more of the burden falls on local property owners.
That is the case in our district, yes, sir.
And we're, my goodness, we're, what, 17% commercial, 12% commercial, 80% residential. Unlike Stafford Municipal School District, which is the reverse, so they have lots of businesses and industries that are paying taxes, but at the same time not sending students to school. So they are considered a Robin Hood district because of that. They have a surplus of funds which they're giving up. And did I hear you say that the CAD appraisal value may increase 9% this year? Did I hear that?
We're modeling 9% currently, but we're hearing that it could be 11.
Okay, well that is, I appreciate your being conservative and planning a budget based on a more conservative, because when we started this process, I think Mr. Bassett was not as optimistic as that and thought it might only go up, you know, a percentage or 2%. And so let me ask you this, Ms. Edgar, what happens when our property values increase, the breadth and the depth of our property values increase, and we receive the benefit of that for 12 months, and then, God forbid, should we get into an economic downturn, so 12 months later, right at the time when we need that money the most, the state is going to give us a big-time haircut.
That's what we're planning for. With keeping our eyes on the economic conditions, we were concerned earlier in the year that we might feel that hit with property values rolling into 16, 17. Now, we do understand that there's a lag in the system. However, we're cautiously optimistic for 16, 17, but we're still being very conservative rolling into 17, 18, 19, especially with the bringing on new campuses. So we're going to feel a little bit of a crunch. That's why we're trying to use the surplus that we're experiencing this year and the formulas working in our favor to ease us into the next couple of years.
Yes, and I appreciate that. And you have budgeted funds that we did not spend all the money that we received this year, and we've created our own economic stabilization fund because we'll likely need it next year. And when I got on this board in 2010, we had a shortfall from the state of $28 million. So 86% of our budget is tied up in salaries and benefits.
That's correct.
And with a shortfall that pronounced, as we experienced back then, it's very painful. And of course, I know you know this, but this board has to pass a balanced budget. We cannot spend more than our revenue. We cannot borrow money to do that. We have a balanced budget every single year, unlike Congress. So I really appreciate your, I think one of the benefits that you and Mr. Bassett bring to this school district is your ability to forecast revenue and plan for these conservative budgets so that we can continue the educational programs that are already in place year after year after year. It's really hard to do that when your funding source is erratic. Just a couple more questions. Moving on to debt service. I know that through the help of Mr. Villasenor and Mr. Frells, we're managing our debt service in such a way we have we're beginning to refund some of our long-term debt, like a mortgage on your house, for a lower interest rate. That's going to realize net savings to the district on the debt service. And if I recall, I heard Mr. Bassett, and I don't know if this is still true, so correct me if I'm not, that over time we may find ourselves able to lower the INS debt service by 2 cents.
Yes, sir. We're actually currently modeling that in this projection.
Mm-hmm. That's a remarkable achievement. And is it also true that we cannot use the debt service for operations?
Yes, sir.
Okay, all right. And then lastly, on child nutrition, I think I heard you say that the Texas Department of Agriculture will not allow us to keep a fund balance that exceeds 3 months of operating costs, and that currently we're just a little over 2 months. Is that correct?
Sir.
So that's due to the careful stewardship of Ms. Gail Stotler managing our child nutrition. And when it does get that high, do we have the ability, if it were to exceed 3 months, could we apply to the Texas Department of Agriculture and say we're going to use these funds to improve the kitchens in our campuses, or give the money back to them?
We absolutely can come up with a plan, and I believe prior to my arrival here, that's what occurred at the, and we got a citing in the audit.
Yes.
And we had to come up with a plan of how we were going to utilize the funds. And that's when you're seeing that $2.5 million carryover. That was from the plan to reduce the fund balance below 3 months, I believe.
Yes. Well, that is exactly what happened. I'm just repeating it for the sake of the audience here tonight. And but that's really our choice, right? If our fund balance gets to be over 3 months, we have the option to give the surplus back to the state. We know they'll take good care of it. Or we can use it to improve our own kitchens in our campuses, right?
Sure.
Okay. Well, I would really like to thank you for a very well presented report, and thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Rice. Mr. Rosenthal?
Yes, ma'am. Just a quick one. The new positions in aggregate, those include the new staff for Ann Sullivan Elementary, right?
Yes, yes, they do.
Okay.
They're included in the projections that you had already seen.
Right.
The new recommendations in May will be mainly at secondary. There's some fine arts, but we'll have that all outlined for you.
But those are in here. I mean, the elementary ones are already in here.
Yes.
Okay, cool. All right, thank you.
All right, do we have any other questions? I have one question. You mentioned that at the end of this year, you're hoping to be able to move some money into the major maintenance fund, I heard. Maybe a fund to refresh the White Fleet, and there was a third thing that I think you mentioned that was...
Technology Internal Service Fund.
Okay, the technology. So we would move some funds to save for future projects, or to make those funds whole again for our projects that might come up. Because we've used those through the spring this year. Is that my understanding?
That's true. Additionally, that $7.7 million surplus, we'll be recommending a fund balance strategy in regards to that surplus as well. And that will go into the Economic Stabilization Fund and some various other things that will guide us into the next couple of years.
Okay, and we'll be able to decide what the best plan for that is once we get some updated CAD values, and as the next couple of 6 weeks or so go by.
Exactly, and we'll have that next week.
Excellent. All right, well, thank you very much. Your presentation was very excellent, and we appreciate you taking the time to bring it to us tonight and help us to understand the budget as it's developing. Thank you very much, Ms. Edgar. All right, I believe that concludes our information items. So next on the agenda is closed session. We have quite a long list of closed session items tonight, so appreciate your patience as we will be working through these for quite some time, I'm guessing. The board will now convene in closed session for the purpose of a private consultation with the board's attorney, consider the purchase, exchange, lease of real property, several personnel matters, as well as some personally identifiable information about a public school student. The board is now convened in closed session.